Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan Cheka-Lusignan, Director of Marketing and Program Development for the Friends and Foundation of the Rochester Public Library. Welcome to our spring series of Books Sandwiched In. Please silence your cell phones. Our thanks go to those who help fund programs like these through FFRPL, the dedicated FFRPL committee members who curate and organize these events, our guest speakers and artists who so graciously share their time and talents with us, the library staff who help with our setup and production, and the thousands of people who attend each year. We are live streaming the formal portion of today's program to the library's YouTube channel. If you need access to the induction loop service in the auditorium, please adjust your hearing aid to the T switch. FFRPL raises funds, presents programs, supports special projects, helps to create specialized spaces, and purchases supplemental materials and equipment for the Rochester Public Library. Here are a few examples from each category. FFRPL is having a fundraiser for the Evelyn Bailey Shoulders to Stand On Endowed Fund, which will help provide staff and resources at Central Library to preserve and share the history of Rochester's LGBTQIA community through archival collections and programming. Love is love. We have a $10,000 matching grant for gifts received by March 31st. Visit ffrpl.org for more information or to make a donation online. We present programs such as today's BSI Review. February was Black History Month. FFRPL supports this annual project by creating an online resource of library exhibits and programs and promoting the library happenings across all platforms. FFRPL also helped fund the library's collaboration with RIT's industrial students who are assisting with the retrofit of the van for Lyle's new mobile library, a specialized space which will support the expansion of outreach services to Rochester residents. The mobile library is slated to begin operating this fall. FFRPL also purchased thousands of Eclipse glasses for Central Library and RPL City branches in preparation for the total eclipse on April 8th. Patrons here at Central can receive up to 2 pairs of free Eclipse glasses per family with an MCLS library card, or you can sign up for a library card at the circulation desk. Please contact the branches for their distribution details. Thanks to donor support, FFRPL was able to purchase these supplemental materials. The library is an official Eclipse ambassador working with the Rochester Museum and Science Center to present Eclipse programming and educate the community on the eclipse and eclipse safety. Visit rockcitylibrary.org for information on library programs. Today, we'll hear a review of The Wingmen by Adam Lazarus. The Wingmen is the story of the 50-year friendship between 2 Marine Corps aviators and American icons, astronaut John Glenn and baseball legend Ted Williams. Our presenter is Jim Holleran. Jim is a retired teacher from the Rochester City School District. He was a sports editor at the Democrat and Chronicle in the 1990s. He referees high school lacrosse and basketball, and he writes a weekly column for the Journal in Ogdensburg. Please join me in welcoming Jim to our podium.
Thank you to the Friends and Foundation of the Rochester Public Library for inviting me to Books Sandwiched In. I appreciate Susan Lusignan and her staff with accommodating me, and I hope I'm a worthy contributor. I have to say, this is like a jury of my peers because my wife is here, and she'll correct anything I mess up. And I also wore the Community Foundation polo today just to be in good form. I got a couple friends that I play golf with. I have 2 referees, so if that one fellow keeps yelling in the hallway, I'm sure that John Litwitz can go out there and give him the full bird and eject him from the library. So, first of all, who am I? I'm a former sports editor of the DNC, and we like to say when it was good. My wife, the former Metro editor, now the Senior Vice President for Communications at Rochester Area Community Foundation, and I always toss that into conversations, when it was good. Because back in our heyday 30 years ago, the DNC sold 265,000 copies on Sunday and 200,000 on weekdays. So it really hurts to see it wither on the vine right now. But that's people's changing habits, so not too much we can do. I'm the son of a retired, I'm a retired elementary school teacher, son of a labor and delivery nurse, son of a coach and athletic director, who also was a former World War II Army Air Corps baseball player. Of course, I write my weekly column, and I do a lot of other things too. Church supper program, parish council. We have a pie network. We give away pies to worthy individuals. Somebody goes through a loss in their family, we show up and give them a pie. My other friend, Donna Ritchie, is here, and she heads a group called Sleep in Heavenly Peace. And we've built and made over 800 beds for needy kids in Rochester. It's a wonderful ministry. Get her later if you want to help jump in there. I read news sites every day. I cringe at the amount of misinformation and opinion passed off as news. I don't have cable TV, but I know talk shows are the worst offenders. I prefer historical books or first-person accounts. The two books sitting on my nightstand right now are Liz Cheney's Oath and Honor, and my old friend from the DNC, Barb McQuaid, has just written a book called Attack from Within, about how misinformation is challenging the institutions in our country. I don't read fiction or mysteries, and I don't pay attention to sports books. Although I have an extensive background in sports, I would never read them if I thought they chronicled the accolades of stars or detailed the heroics on the field of dreams. That's all fandom. This is not that kind of sports book, although it relies heavily on perhaps baseball's greatest hitter. The best sports book I've read was Pulitzer Prize-winning author David Halberstam's Summer of 1949. Boston was always a bridesmaid with Williams. The Bo Sox lost the 1946 World Series. Then Williams and the Boston Red Sox lost a one-game playoff to the Cleveland Indians in 1948. In 1949, the Red Sox rallied from a 12-game deficit in the standings against Joe DiMaggio and the Yankees. But on the last day of the season, with identical 96 and 57 records, the teams played game number 154, deciding game of the season. 68,000 fans at Yankee Stadium. Of course, the Red Sox lost. And curiously, the Yankees pitcher that day was Vic Raschi, who ran a liquor store in his retirement in Geneseo, New York, in Groveland. That book, Summer of '49, was not so much about baseball, but it was the way that David Halberstam put it together. He went around and found every guy on every roster and tracked them down around the country and told their individual stories. And this book doesn't do that, but it approaches that. It doesn't get into the supporting characters in the flight squadrons. It's mostly focused on the two wingmen. There's no pennant race, but it's apparent that Lazarus compiled a lot of research from letters of servicemen, newspaper accounts, and military records. Let's see if I can use my PowerPoint here. So here's our author. This isn't responding. Any luck? I'm on a slide about the author, but it's not catching up. Yeah, the laptop. Time out. I'm using the up and down keys.
Left and right. So that's forward.
Okay. Not responding. So here's our author. Adam lives in Atlanta, master's from Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. This is his 5th book. I've got a list of his books at the end of the presentation that I'll share with you. I appreciated this book. The great thing about this book is it allows your mind to wander back through history to the 1940s, 1950s. It provides a glimpse of society, technology, aviation, and a nation at war. And maybe you'll be familiar with an airfield that they flew out of or trained at, or a ship that fellows were transported to Korea on. For my own purposes, it sent me on a mission to understand my father's big lament. He told me as a boy that he missed playing against Ted Williams by 2 days in the service. And I looked it up, and the best I could find out was that Ted Williams was stationed in Peru, Indiana, about 60 miles away from Fort Wayne. And they never crossed paths. My dad's told me 2 days, but I don't find any evidence that Ted Williams played baseball there. But I'm very thankful because twice my dad was getting ready to ship out, and the commandant, and I know these guys were betting like crazy on this stuff, said, "Holleran, go to sick bay. You've got appendicitis." And so twice he avoided getting into like the real conflict. So I'm very fortunate. You know the old sports line, this is before the Jumbotron age, you can't tell the players without a scorecard. Well, to read this book, I put together a slide. I stole this map out of the back of the book, and it might be faint to see, but all the bases that they mention in the book are all designated in Korea with a K. And so, for the most part, K3 was Ted Williams' home base, but they would land at different bases. So I think it's important to have this. It kind of helps you to visualize what they're doing. The other thing that I found important, at least for me, was that there is a lot of jargon in this book. Anything that has a V in front of it means fixed wing aircraft, and they're constantly switching between, I'm at VMF dash 239 or something like that. I couldn't sort it all out. I never knew where I was half the time. So you may want to just keep like a little cheat sheet on the side. So these two guys are the odd couple. John Glenn, college educated, married his high school sweetheart, married 73 years. And then Ted Williams was all over the place. He was married 3 times. He had several dalliances with several different women, three children. And their politics were polar opposites too. As we know, John Glenn becomes a senator from Ohio and runs for the Democratic presidential nomination, doesn't win it. And then there's Ted Williams, who will support anybody Republican. And I like that line. He was to the right of Attila the Hun. So Williams gets a lot of attention at the beginning of the book because he was the baseball star. His father wasn't a central figure in his youth. His mother worked long hours for the Salvation Army. So right after high school, the baseball diamond became his portal to the independent world around him. Everything revolved around baseball, and Williams had a dedication, an obsession would be a better word, to be remembered as one of the game's best hitters. You couldn't open up the sporting news or unfold the sports pages of your daily newspaper without seeing Williams' name in the headlines. Number 9 patrolled left field in Fenway Park and was a batting average champion, a prolific slugger, and a friend to seemingly every child hospitalized with cancer in Boston. He disdained any publicity, but he spent a lot of days visiting sick children, signing baseballs and bats and lifting their spirits. A great deal of the goodwill and thoughtfulness was compromised by his disdain for the sports writers and fans. The adjectives you'll hear associated with Williams are arrogant, ornery, tempestuous. One of the famous little anecdotes from the book is how Ted Williams was upset that the fans booed him, so he went over and he spit in the general direction of the fans in this box seat, and then he turned to this side and he spit in the general direction of those fans and got fined $5,000 by the Boston Red Sox owner, which was an unheard of fine at that day. But that was Ted Williams. I know that one time he perched the press box, but I couldn't find that on the wires. After a crucial games, Williams might be, so baseball's totally different than now. We're still in the era of trains, okay? So after a crucial game, Williams might be questioned by 7 beat reporters for their game stories and 7 columnists looking for a kernel to develop an opinion piece. The media was much different then. The reporters were all men, clad in suits and ties, and the ball clubs paid for the newsmen's meals and transportation. Everybody traveled by train, so you could have a beef with a guy during the day and then be stuck on the train with him all the way back from St. Louis to Boston. Like Williams, Glenn carried a similar capacity for precision and detail. He played everything by the book or by the training manual that he probably wrote. Before the Korean War, he was stuck in a desk job writing manuals in Florida. And he really wanted to be, all he wanted to do was fly. So Glenn dominates the second half of the book because of his career with NASA. First man to orbit the Earth, and his political career, senator from Ohio, unsuccessful candidate for the 1984 presidential nomination, and then we'll all remember him as the 77-year-old who completed a 9-day mission on the space shuttle in 1998. So Ted Williams spent a great deal of time complaining that after World War II, in which he never was in combat, all he did was do instruction in Florida. He never resigned his position in the Marine Corps Reserves. And so in 1952, the government reached in, snatched him and said, you know, we need pilots in Korea, you're coming back. And he felt like he was being robbed of, you know, all his two seasons of potential earnings, and he was upset about that. So they went back and snatched him, and that's how these two guys ended up in Korea together. I've never done this before, so I don't want to give away too many details of the book and ruin it for potential readers. But I just want to give you a snapshot of what's going on. Both guys, somebody whispered in their ears and said, you need to get into jets. There were a lot of what might have been 300-mile-an-hour planes that were propeller-driven, and somebody said, you need to get into jets. So they both did. Before Ted Williams left, April 30th, 1952, he hit a home run that day, and he waved his cap to the crowd. And Ted Williams refused most of his career to tip his hat to people because he was ticked off about being booed early in his career. And then you'll see on the slide there, it says Glenn was sniveling. Well, John Glenn had a habit, if he wanted to get, say, into a jet program or he wanted to get into this program, he would write letters to the superior officer. And Lazarus refers to it as sniveling. He was a really buttering guys up so he could get what he wanted to do. He wanted the fastest planes, and he wanted to be in combat. So they got there 12 days apart. John Glenn wrote to his wife, said, Ted Williams, he's okay. So they're part of this bombing group called the Blow and Go. In other words, go in, drop your ordnance, and get the heck out of there. Flew 8 missions together. But the big thing about being a wingman, and John Glenn served as the wingman, was that you never left your guy. Well, that was a problem because John Glenn was like a nutty pilot. Your wingmen will say, hey, you're on fire, go on up to a higher altitude where there's less oxygen, and the flames will die and stuff like that. Well, people didn't like flying with John Glenn. I'm going to pass on the quote, but basically, John Glenn would fly in and drop his bombs. Then he would circle back around. Now, the wingman's got to go with him. So he comes back in, and he starts firing his cannon at anything that moves. So he's exposing his wingmen to more flak from ground fire. And so guys didn't want to fly with John Glenn. He got hit so many times, they nicknamed him Magnet Ass. And to give Ted Williams grief, the guys called him Bush Leaguer. So after the war, Williams goes back to the Red Sox. They still don't win a World Series. Goes into the Hall of Fame. He was a terrible manager with the Washington Senators, I'm told. But he got into this really good gig where he endorsed products for Sears and Roebuck and got into all these professional fishing tours. And of course, John Glenn gets himself transferred from the Marine Corps into the NASA program, and then he's the first guy to orbit the Earth. It's curious, in politics, of course, these guys were total opposites. The Kennedys, because John Glenn had such a high recognition rating, a Q rating, that they recruited him to come to Hyannisport and spend the weekend with the Kennedy family, and they wanted him to be seen with the Kennedys for photo ops and things like that, and they drew him right into Democratic politics. There was a really good thing about the demise of Bobby Kennedy, who we know was assassinated in 1968, and John Glenn had a significant role in that within the Kennedy family. Again, spoiler alert, I don't want to say too much. So let me jump back here. So throughout the second half of the book, Lazarus shows us how this odd couple was always on opposite sides of issues. In politics, we know Democrat, Republican. John Glenn used to say there's no cure for the common birthday. So here comes John Glenn, 77 years old, snivels his way into the NASA program. Meanwhile, Ted Williams suffers from heart disease and strokes. But man, when John Glenn went back into space, Ted Williams jumped out of his wheelchair and goes, "That's my guy. He's my hero." Blah blah blah. It was kind of a cool moment. They both got the Presidential Medal of Freedom, highest award that you can give to a civilian. George Bush, the Republican, honored Ted Williams. Barack Obama, Democrat, honors John Glenn. And even their deaths were like polar opposites. In 2016, John Glenn's family walked his casket through the rain to its final resting place in Arlington National Cemetery. But it was much less the tabloid circus of Ted Williams, who had died 14 years earlier. And again, this is not so much history, this is stuff that we've all lived through, because if you're a sports fan, you know that in 2002, when Ted Williams died, they want his family, who was in control of everything, they had him frozen in a lab in Scottsdale, Arizona. So to this date, John Glenn's head has been removed from his body, right? And one guy's nodding out there. And the rest of him is suspended upside down in some kind of cryogenics lab vessel. There was a whole big fight over his estate, who was going to get the money. Total opposite of John Glenn, who had a very dignified death. There's a lot of great deal and anecdotes that I know that you'll enjoy in this book, and I hope that you'll give it a try. So, can I answer any questions? Yes, Diana.
Other than common experience, what do you think drew these guys together?
Perfectionism. John Glenn, he wrote training manuals. He was the squadron leader. He was constantly coaching up guys. Ted Williams wanted to be known as like the greatest hitter ever in baseball. And so they both had these very, that tunnel vision, very single-minded approaches to everything they did, and I think that's how they came together. Yes, Laura.
About how much the book was about each of them, so I mean, is it kind of like two halves, or does it talk about their friendship?
Yeah, it delves into Ted Williams and sets the scene for him. It sets the scene for John Glenn. It brings them together in Korea, and that's where it gets very dense with all the acronyms and things like that. So, and then it splits off where they lead two different lives, but they come together several times later in the book at reunions, at NASA events, things of that nature.